Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses for joining us today. Appreciate you taking the time to be involved with us. I know we've had a lot of conflicting things that have been said as we've gone through this hearing, but it's undeniable that we're experiencing strong growth in our economy. Since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act were passed in 2017, hardworking Americans are now enjoying the lowest unemployment rate in decades, and in some cases in recorded history of unemployment, and well-deserved wage growth. I might argue a little bit of some of the comments about whether we've seen wage growth every year. If you look back since the 90s up until a few years ago, median income was stagnant at around the $35,000, $36,000 a year level for family income. What we're seeing that grow. We're seeing that the actual percentage of people that are working has increased as well, which had been declining. Last year in my district in Kansas, middle-class families got over a $2,100 increase in average per family in the growth in their income. So not only when you talk about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it's been a success for families and for workers, and it's allowed our businesses to thrive in the global economy. We all know that tax structure and tax policy affect decisions, both for companies as well as for individuals. And our old antiquated tax code really punished companies that were based in the United States because we had the highest effective tax rate. And what it did was it drove them to actually move their operations overseas, at least compared to what other G7 countries are. Because the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act helped level the playing field, countries are starting to move production back in the United States and bringing more jobs back to Kansas and the rest of the country. When corporations choose to stay in the United States and leave their money and their taxes here, they do invest in new technology, new infrastructure, as well as hiring more Americans. I've seen that in Wichita, Kansas, which is the center of my district. We're known as the air capital of the world. We're seeing a lot more manufacturing, particularly in aerospace, as well as some of the other manufacturing areas there. So we're seeing the benefits of that. Since 2017, there's 35,000 new jobs added in Kansas. And so workers are seeing, in addition to seeing a job themselves, seeing higher wages as well as bonuses that were paid. I did have a couple questions. Mr. Holtz-Eakin, in addition to our very high corporate tax rate, there were other parts of our tax code that were harming our competitive position prior to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Of course, the United States had a worldwide tax system with deferral. And how do you compare our prior tax code with our competitors and how that impacted us?
We were badly out of line with our developed world competitors. We were the only country left with a worldwide system. We had seen others with worldwide systems on basically an annual basis. Some OECD country would flip over to a more territorial system. None are pure, but they were all moving in the same direction. We were the last to get on that train. The rate, of course, was the highest, and certainly 21% was a dramatic change in the rate, but it got us to the middle of the pack, and the pack's still moving south. So, after the '86 reform, we had the lowest corporate rate in the world. We got around to the next tax reform, we had the highest one. So I think it's worth keeping an eye on where our competitive position is at every point.
Thank you on that. And one of the other things, too, I think there was some discussion earlier and maybe some confusion in terms of what was being said about working class Americans and whether the tax reform really overlooked them. Is there anything you want to add to your statements around that to clarify what might have been some confusion around how they're benefiting?
I think the central challenge at the time of the act was to improve growth in the U.S. economy, to give those working people a better chance at the American dream. The standard of living used to double every 35 years. It was on track to double every 75 years. And people felt their access to the American dream disappearing over the horizon. I wanted policies that would change that. And we don't tax corporations. People pay taxes, but how we collect those taxes matters. And our corporate code was hurting American workers in a very dramatic fashion.
Yeah, which is an interesting statistic about it would only double every 75 years under the old tax code. So I appreciate that comment. So thank you. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Let me recognize the gentleman from California.